So, Rebecca, it's been a while, and I was taking a nap today, and I woke up, and I was still kind of drowsy, so I was looking through Reddit, and I came across some subreddits that had to do with therapy, and some of the posts that were on there, I thought, well, this would be interesting to talk about. And then it led me to think maybe we should always have a segment in which we read different things on Reddit, because I feel like the things that float to the top of my feed are some pretty juicy things to get into. What do you say, Rebecca?
Yeah, and I just want to say I've missed everyone. I had COVID, and then I had long COVID. Now I'm out and about. And if you ever want to find me, I'm on Instagram at rtext, RTEXT.
Yeah. I was also thinking we haven't promoted your art therapy workbooks in a while.
Oh.
Why don't you plug those?
On Amazon, it's funny, it gets really bad reviews, but people actually love it. There are some chakra-based images in there, and all of my kind of first 20 years of art therapy directives are in there. And it's called Square the Circle, the Art Therapy Workbook.
I remember when you came on the podcast 10, 12 years ago and talked about Square the Circle. I thought it was so cool that you actually had a published product on Amazon. All right, this is a Reddit post. It says here, my therapist texted me 5 minutes before our phone session yesterday to tell me that she was wasted.
Whoa.
Verbatim, here's what she said. I have to be completely transparent with you. I'm wasted. The person goes on to say, my heart sank when I saw this. She's an addict, but has been clean for some time as far as I knew. I understand her humanity and respect that everyone has their demons, but not everyone should be a therapist. I am so disappointed and sad, and honestly, I feel like she shattered my trust. She's been my therapist for about 6 years. What's worse is that she was really insistent on having a session anyways. She called me 3 times, kept texting me, and would keep texting me that I would have her full attention and that she was sorry. She even brought up parts of my home life and apologized, saying she knew why this event would be so triggering for me. It feels like betrayal at best and downright illegal at worst. I'm sad, very sad. I'm angry, and I feel violated. Rebecca, what do you think?
Yeah, the therapist should not have done that. They should have just said, I'm under the weather and I can't make our session today. I'm so sorry. And then they should have texted all that other stuff to someone else, maybe their sponsor or a friend or their therapist, because they're clearly not in a place to work.
Yeah. What do you think about the therapist trying to cajole the client into actually having a session?
No. The trust is broken at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, they are begging. They're trying to what's that called? Backpedal?
Backpedal?
They're trying to backpedal at that point and be like, nothing wrong, nothing to see here. But they've already broken the container. Yeah. And you can't put that back together.
Well, also, if you're that intoxicated, how are you going to be an effective therapist? What I would say is that's awful for the client, and I'm sorry that happened. I don't know any way to get out of that, because normally if a therapist does something like this, you can have a conversation with your therapist and say, hey, I felt this way. But this shows the client, at least while intoxicated, lacks judgment, lacks the ability to know how to proceed in the best interest of the client, right? It also sounds like the therapist was kind of in a shame spiral and confessing to their client, and then also backpedaling and saying like, well, no, I can do it. And please accept me, client, even though I drank. Like, why are you rejecting it? I don't know. It just kind of has that shame spiral feel to it. Yeah. Which tells me that this therapist is not only just impaired because of alcohol, but impaired because in general, because of their personality or their disorder, or something's going on with them that would cause this to happen. I mean, there's so many things that have to go wrong, that the fact that they drank on a day that they were working before they were seeing their clients, not only just drank, but drank a lot, right? Yeah.
I mean, I remember the one day, I don't know if you ever shop at PCC, but in the fruit section, they put alcoholic drinks next to the fruit. I didn't realize, I thought it was just sparkling water. Because I would.
Oh no!
Yes, I would assume you would say like, "This has alcohol in it." For those of you who aren't paying attention, and so I packed it in my lunch, and I took a big swig at lunch, and was like, "Oh, crap!" And I told my next client, because it was such a ridiculous story, and they laughed really hard. And it was only one sip, but I was like,
"Oh, you just had one sip."
Yeah, I mean, it was
a gulp.
It was a gulp. But needless to say, it takes a lot of focus to be a therapist. I personally can't do it on drugs and alcohol. I can't imagine A, being drunk in a session, and then B, trying to make my client make me feel better. That says a lot.
Yeah, so I think if someone came to me with this, I would say report her, not only for your sake, but also for other clients' sake and for her own sake, for the therapist's sake, because she probably, in all likelihood, would be sanctioned in a way that wouldn't eliminate her ability to practice, but would require that she get sober and go to treatment.
Yeah, there is a state ethics board that you can, and this person probably has a number attached to their state license, and you can report it to that board. I've actually heard a story about someone who was using extreme substances and went into treatment and was allowed to keep their practice, but had to go through quite a procedure in order to do so.
Yeah. So that would benefit the therapist, the client, and all the other clients. So that's what I would recommend. And it's, the board is there for those situations. That's exactly what they're there to do.
Yeah.
Is to help therapists who need that help for the benefit of society. But honestly, I'm just trying to think what I would feel in a situation like that.
If you were the client?
Yeah. I mean, because they've been seeing you, they've been for 6 years.
Here, I'll be the client.
Huh?
I mean, it is such a breaking of trust.
Yeah.
I just ask that you're there for me 1 hour a week. That's all I ask.
Yeah.
I don't have that a lot of other places.
Yeah.
And you just messed it up so bad. And I can't trust you again. I mean, that's the thing. It's with addiction. It's like if you've, proved to me now that you're not going to use again. And it appears that the therapist knew this would be triggering.
Right, given their issues.
Yeah.
Now, if you're that intoxicated, if you're that in the throes of an addiction, judgment goes out the window in a million ways, including this. So that's not unusual. But yeah, I can't imagine how I would feel. I think on one hand, I would feel absolutely violated and unsafe and unsure, and I would wonder, were they intoxicated in the past in other sessions? It would really mess with my mind. On the other hand, I think I would wait and see, just given my personality, and see what would happen. To be like, maybe, hopefully they deal with that, and then when we actually work with each other, we can return to a place where I guess I now know this thing about them, but I can get what I want out of therapy. Because if I'm going to a therapist for 6 years, presumably I like the therapist.
Yeah, that's a long-term relationship.
Yeah, so I think I wouldn't, if the relationship was good and the therapy was good, I think I would just want the therapist to deal with it on their own, and for us just to get back to the mode we were usually in, where they were listening and I was talking, and everything was kind of normal. Because there are, in terms of me as a client, I'm not terribly interested in my therapist's lives. There'll be certain things that will emerge either through self-disclosure or just, my last therapist, she, in the span of our work together, she became pregnant and had the child and was sitting in session maybe a week before she gave birth. Because, self-employment, you don't get maternity leave, right? And she did not look comfortable. She was nodding off, which I totally understood, and I just figured, well, I understand, and I can't imagine what she's going through. I feel bad for her that she has to sit through these sessions, and endure me anyway. And so I just wanted her to, I just figured she would deal with whatever she had to deal with, and I was okay. And then eventually, maybe in 6 to 9 months or something, we'd be back to our kind of regular vibe. Anyway, another Reddit post here says, feeling judged by my therapist. I used my own therapy client's first name during a personal session and she corrected me. I would like advice. I am a social worker therapist who works in community mental health. I have been seeing my own therapist weekly for 5 years. Last week, I was telling her about some very intense experiences I'd had recently with two of my clients. And as I described the experiences, I avoided using any identifiable information. So she's talking with her therapist. She is a therapist. The client's a therapist. She's like, there are these two clients, and it's pretty intense for me. And eventually, to keep things clear between the two clients, she says, I used one of my clients' first name. Their name is very common for the record. So she's like,
Jane,
okay, yeah, Jenny did this, and then the other client was doing this to me. My therapist immediately said, maybe don't use your clients' names. And I suddenly felt very judged and ashamed. I assumed that because everything between my therapist and I is so just chiming, like when people use I as an object, my therapist and between my therapist and I, it just really gets to me.
Now this person's going to feel judged not only by their therapist, but I felt really judged by Dr. Kirk on my Reddit post.
I judge it. People you have a graduate degree, you understand the basics of grammar. You would never say, I assume that because everything between I is confidential. You would say between me is confidential. And
thank you, grammar police.
Well, I'm not a grammar police individual. It's all the papers that I would read in graduate school, and this would come up, and I would say, stop it. Anyway, I assume that because everything between my therapist and I is confidential, the fact that I casually mentioned my client's first name wouldn't be an issue because she can't legally say anything to anyone. And my conclusion is that she thinks I am untrustworthy and irresponsible as a person. This is absolutely not the case. I am very respectful of my client's confidentiality and have never shared identifiable information about any of them with anyone. Rebecca, what do you think?
So I let stuff like that go in the session. I know that different people are different.
So if you had a client that was a therapist and they were talking along those lines, you're saying you would let it go?
Yeah, because I'm not going to remember it 10 minutes later. I think that as in therapy in particular, we get real nervous about ethics stuff, which is great, but sometimes it makes us kind of rigid. And if a client is talking through something traumatic, I think policing their language with things like this doesn't really help. Doesn't help them. So I am more chill about this, and I would have not corrected the client.
Yeah, for me, what I'll say is the same. If a client was talking about a client and they said a first name, well, I don't know what I would do, honestly, because I'm a bit of a stickler for that as well. Not because I would be concerned that the name would somehow reveal who the person was, but I would be worried that my client it would be a slippery slope or something. But I certainly wouldn't say it in a way that made the client feel shamed or something. I would just be like, oh, well, maybe we should just use like nicknames or something because I don't want to, because honestly for me is once information goes in my head, I sometimes forget like where I got it from. Now as a therapist, obviously it's pretty easy for me to keep everything straight, but also, I don't know, I would just say like, but I would I would be very careful to not make the client feel weird, mostly because I would feel like I was the weird one. I'd just be like, look, this is just kind of my thing. And, but I would totally understand if a therapist like yourself just didn't really care. And honestly, I can't remember the last time I ran into this situation, so I'm not even quite sure if my answer is
And often,
accurate.
I have quite a few therapists as clients, and often they'll be stumbling, and I'll just say, just use the name or unname. I won't remember.
Yeah. Yeah, well, in supervision, that's much more of a common thing for me, and I actually will explicitly explain that in supervision, where I'm the supervisor, supervisees can absolutely talk about their clients and use identifiable information because I'm their supervisor. Because some supervisees will be like, can we use first names? And I'll be like, well, this is supervision, so specifically it's okay. Anyway.
And if you've been my client, you might notice that I say your spouse or your husband or your oldest child, because I can't recall all those names. Names for me, I'll never forget a face till the day that I die, but names for me are like...
Yeah, I'm the same.
They're like Kleenex.
Yeah, I'm the same. That's why I would actually keep notes on a genogram about spouse's name and keep it next to me so that I could keep it straight, or their dog's name or something like that. But yeah, I'm the same. I never forget a face. I'll see someone from grade school in a public place, and I'll be like, I was in the 5th grade with that guy. And so yeah, I'm pretty good with faces, but yeah, I'm pretty bad with names. But anyway, but to address the issue is that it's not any, so say you were to do this and you were to be reported. I can't imagine anyone taking action against you
it wouldn't
at
go
all.
anywhere.
Yeah. At most, they would just be like, yeah, maybe just don't do that, just to be on the safe side. But I'm guessing most people just be like, I don't see a problem here, really. But to be clear, there's no exception to confidentiality like that. You can't tell. If I, as a therapist, go to my therapist and talk about my clients, I can't say, well, my therapist can't legally, the way she puts it, my therapist can't legally talk about things outside of therapy. One, that's not strictly true, because if I reveal something, if I talk about one of my clients, so say I'm saying my client, Jenny Anderson, I know a Jenny Anderson from high school. That's kind of weird but my client, Jenny Anderson.
I'm sure there's more than one Jenny Anderson.
Is abusing her child. Again, I don't even know if she has a child, by the way. But I wouldn't forget her face. And according to the law, my therapist in Washington State would actually have to report that and probably even say the name, because they have been told about child abuse about child abuse. So it's not legally protected at all times, one. Two, there's not an exception to confidentiality that says you must remain confidential except when you go to therapy. You can talk about, there's no exception. There seemed to be, I was even looking in the comment section, there seemed to be some notion out there that you can tell your therapist anything, and that's just not true. Plus, your therapist is a human being in the world and could run into your client. They might even know your client, but wouldn't know that until you reveal information that would identify them, and that puts everyone in a weird position. So there's that. But the most important thing is, for this individual, if they were talking to me, I would say, well, just talk to your therapist and say, I kind of felt like you were judgy.
Yeah.
And it hurt my feelings. What's going on? And
also, how often does the client land on shame? And is this a dynamic for them?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well, that the client seems to be triggering something for them about their past. Yeah. And what a wonderful opportunity to have some corrective experience in therapy, at the very least, where you can voice that you felt like, okay, fine, that's your boundary, but why do you have to come down that hard on things? So let's see. I think another person was replying to this, and they say, a few years ago, I was talking with my therapist about a client case that was triggering some of my own stuff, not getting into specifics or providing any identifying info, just mentioning the themes and the content of our work. My therapist stopped me and said, I am not in a position to be providing clinical supervision. And I was completely caught off guard. I was not asking for any advice on my case, but just trying to process and make sense of the experience and how it was affecting me. I felt super embarrassed, and I completely shut down. It felt like she was scolding me and hadn't even let me finish what I was trying to say. Does all that make sense, Rebecca?
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Came down kind of hard. I think people need to process a lot of content. And I mean, another way that the therapist could have said that is, we'll be sticking with the therapeutic lens here, and I won't, this isn't supervision or something.
Right. Because there's certainly a lot you can get into that's clearly not supervisory. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I will say what's interesting about the times that we live in right now is that I think everybody just feels kind of shredded and skinless, and anything can feel like an attack right now. I've really noticed that in myself and with other people. It's just, we're all just extremely fragile right now.
Well, that has to do with the next Reddit post. But before we get to that, for my own style, so there's different ways of approaching this. So I'm the therapist, and my client, who's also a therapist, is talking about their clients. And yeah, the safest, I think, most appropriate road is to say what you said, which is like, oh, okay, we can get into this for sure, but just know that I'm not your supervisor, of course, and I know you know that. And so I can't get into, although I might kind of be provoked, I have to keep in mind myself as your therapist that I can't get into clinical material because you already have a supervisor. And so that's not what we're doing here. But I absolutely am interested in what you're talking about, which is the feelings and how you're doing and all that stuff. And as a fellow therapist, I could relate to a lot of things that you're feeling. So that would be the safest route. But I will say that on this one, I'm a bit more of a loosey-goosey, boundaried person. If I have, and I have had, clients who are therapists come to me and talk about their clients, and we get into, obviously, the emotional content related to their therapeutic goals. But if they started asking me questions like, well, should I do this or should I do that? I don't think I would have a problem answering those questions. I would tell them, by the way, I'm not your supervisor, so we're at this moment, you're just consulting with another therapist. But because it's so hard for me to watch a therapist struggle when I might be able to help them, when I might be able to provide some knowledge or perspective or something. And so I would definitely couch it as that, of just like, so I'm not telling you this as your therapist because this isn't a therapeutic thing, but I will tell you as a fellow, it'd sort of be like if someone came in and said I was going to put up some drywall in my house, I actually have some stuff to say about drywall and mudding and sanding and all that kind of stuff. I might provide some advice on that, but I'm not going to say, by the way, I'm your foreman and you have to do it this way. And also you shouldn't really respect my opinion on this because I'm not a professional with drywall. You know what I mean? Or if someone had questions about how to take care of their cat or their dog, right? I just think I'm just more loose about stuff like that. I just don't care.
And I'll often say that, like, do you want my advice? And people will say yes or no. And then I'll decide if I want to give my advice.
Right. So let's take a break. We get back. More Reddit segment. What do you say?
More Reddit.
So we're back from the break. Rebecca, I got you a new chair. We got to talk about the whole story of the chair.
What are you in? So Kirk has a nice chair.
America. I don't think you would like this chair.
Yeah.
But
World, not even America. Global audience. Just know Kirk has a good chair. Why wouldn't I
like it?
For
co-hosts. For this, we're talking about... So side note about my chair, I bought this chair at the Jewish secondhand store on Mercer Island. Have you been there?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I bought it for probably like $35, and I've spent $2,000 reupholstering it twice. Wow. It's expensive to reupholster because you have to put new pads in.
Yes, I'm reupholstering a chair right now.
Oh, it's like crazy expensive. It's like much better but I cannot find the regular office chairs that you can find are just not right. I want something that is this chair that I've been using it as my therapy chair for 23 years, and then it became my podcasting chair as well. I love this chair. There's a lot of
wisdom in that. I might have some questions for the chair.
If you're trying to imagine it's wood frame, and then it has like a faux leather upholstery thing. It just looks like a chair that you would find in an office in the 50s, I guess. It's not a swivel chair. It has 4 legs that are firmly on the ground, which is a big thing. And it's also pretty wide butt space because when I sit, I fidget a lot. And so and there are arms. So I always need the arms. And like at Antioch, I would always, because they changed the seats at Antioch. Our old building, the standard chair for everyone was a chair. It wasn't very comfortable, but at least it had arms. The new chairs in the new building, none of the chairs have arms. They're just these rolly, flimsy chairs that look like IKEA things. But there's one chair in every room for people with back pain.
Right. The good chair.
And it's a good chair. It's very comfortable, and it has arms. And as long as no other students took it, I'm like, I'm going to pull my professor prerogative. That's going to be my chair. But anyway, so years and years have passed with various different chairs for the co-hosts. in the beginning, it was just basically any chair I could get my hands on because I didn't have any extra chairs really in the house. And in the very beginning, it was
There's been times I've podcasted with you on the floor.
Yeah. Back in the day.
Yeah.
But
we were bare bones, people.
Yeah. When you were doing your episode about Square the Circle, I remember
we were on the floor.
On my carpet, yeah. And so for a long time, it was literally a flimsy IKEA chair that's like probably $8 or something, and not very comfortable to sit in for hours while you're podcasting, right? Then you would complain about that chair. Which is fine, by the way, which honestly, I totally get because I'm a very. And
I'm sitting here for it's 2 hours here, people.
Yeah. I'm a very
but I heard Umberto is not a complainer.
He doesn't complain at all. So he's the main, and Bob as well. So Bob and Berto are like whatever the opposite of a complainer is, that's what they are. And so they never said anything.
You need one Jewish lady to complain on your show about the
you're
chair.
Normal. Because if I were you, I'd just be like, can we get some, just a cushion? And so you would come in and you'd instantly complain about the chair, which I got. And then, so I got what I believe to be a more comfortable chair, is one of our cushy dining chairs. And you didn't like that chair either. And it's not like, think of a dining chair. It's like, it had a pretty big cushion on the butt. Like when I go to restaurants and I'm sitting in the chair and it doesn't have a pad for the butt, it's just like at some restaurants, it's just like a metal chair.
Hate that.
I will write a Yelp review specifically about how shitty. I'm not talking about some corner restaurant. I'm talking about like a nice Italian restaurant. I'm like, I'm spending how much money? You don't have cushions for chairs, people. Like, come on. And so so I get it. But you were like, this isn't comfortable enough. And then I started giving you a pillow to sit on in addition. And you're still like, yeah, this isn't good. And then, so I'm like, okay, well, I guess it makes sense, now that I've set this whole... Right.
So if you could see this room, the accoutrement is massive.
Yeah.
And I think the co-host should have a nice chair.
Yeah. Yeah. Is
this a Seinfeld episode?
I specifically, when we were moving into this house last year, I was like, okay, I'm going to get the perfect office. I've always been basically cobbling together a podcasting station that was just in the corner of my space. I just sort of like, well, I guess we'll podcast here temporarily, but I really wanted to get like a studio kind of setup, And when you were like, you should have a different chair, I'm just like, yeah, well, I could actually get a permanent co-host chair. So we were at West Elm.
I love it.
And we saw some chairs that were good for our living room. And I was like, this is an extremely comfortable, good-looking, trim, kind of concise chair, and I'll just buy a third one. But because of the supply chains, it took a year for it to arrive, but it's finally here. So, Rebecca, how does it feel? What's the verdict?
It's amazing. It has my favorite texture, which is like kind of a nubby velvet. It's also in one of my favorite colors, kind of a seafoam green. And I'm wearing a burnt umber pants, so the whole thing is a good look.
Very 70s.
It's very 70s, and it has a good cushy back. This is real important to me. That the back is real cushy. I think that's why I didn't like the dining room chair.
Right.
And then it has arms, because it's like, what am I going to do with my arms?
Yeah.
And I think also all of this comes from me. If someone would Google Alana Gussman podcasting, she podcasts like fully reclined in like this amazing chair with this mic. And so that was my fantasy of what podcasting should look like. But I feel like this is a fantastic middle ground. But it was funny. I remember when you were chair shopping and you sent me the photos, and I just like imagined the next time I walked in here, the chair would be here. And just like everything in COVID, don't plan. And eventually the chair shows up.
Yeah. Have we reached the final destination for the chair?
Yes, we are
saga?
In chair parity. We are chair complete.
Okay.
I am happy with the chair.
I've been looking long and hard and check in every month. Is it here yet? When is it coming? And for those who are interested, you can go to West Elm and
Do you have a matching chair?
Google the Carlo chair.
Oh, Carlo.
It's what it's called. And I got the brass feet because I'm getting into brass. I used to be really into like silver fixtures, but I'm starting to get into brass now. And also got the the sea foam green kind of velvety, because you can choose whatever upholstery you want out of like 30 different styles and stuff. So we got that style because it fits kind of our style, but also because it probably will hide dog hair. Because the dogs are very light, white colored, and so I can't wear black anymore, essentially.
Yeah, unlike this shirt, which is covered in Mochi hair.
Yeah.
Am I just trying?
Although Mochi's like kind
burnt
of
umber. She's the color of the
mid-brown kind of.
She would go better with these pants.
Well, I'm glad. I will say though that chair, I didn't realize how heavy it was, and thus it's like a couch. So now that it's there,
it's not going anywhere.
You can't move it back to like get out. So it has to, so that's why when you sat down, you're like, I'm so far away because I can't put it under the desk because you would never be able to get in.
I'd have to take my legs off.
Yeah. But I find, you could just sit.
Now I'm used to it, but it was weird to sit down and be like, you were an extra 2 feet away. And I was like, you're so far. Like it was visually jarring. And that's how sensitive I am these days to change.
Side note, another thing, I was, testing out these new microphones for the first time, and I have been avoiding using the standard microphones for this podcast for 14 years because I'm a bit of a microphone nerd. In fact, the microphone that I use normally is the microphone that you will see on a lot of talk show hosts' desk. The one that's not turned on, but like the Jimmy Fallon's and the David Letterman's, they will and Conan O'Brien have this Audio-Technica. They have the exact mic that I have. Not totally coincidental that the mic I love the most. So I've been avoiding this sort of standard basic. It's not cheap, but it's a standard basic. You'll see it on every podcast if you look on YouTube.
But it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. It's just kind of a cone. It's just kind of a solid cylinder versus the other one looks more like you'd be singing something important.
Yeah.
Which makes me want to share. I brought you a present today. I don't often get to see your face light up with sheer joy.
Oh, right. But before we go into that, because that's a whole story in and of itself. A nice benefit to having these mics is that they pick up less room noise, and thus I can have my window open for you, because I know you like to have the curtains open.
Yes.
So you can see outside, because normally I have to keep them shut for sound echo reasons. But anyway, so let's get to your gift. A few months ago, you knew that I was getting into records, or maybe you sent me an estate sale notification or something. So if you don't know what an estate sale is, it's actually
dead people's things.
Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting. And sometimes I'll cry when I'm walking through people's houses. But essentially, either the old individuals will die, or I'm guessing maybe they're going into a home or something, and the children or a business will come in and sell everything in the house. Like
absolutely everything.
Yeah. Everything, little knickknacks, those
food.
weird, literally like a half-drank bottle of wine. I mean, honestly, or really great stuff as well, like nice jewelry and art and also records. And so I was building my record collection back up, and so Rebecca's been taking me around Seattle, getting me into the culture. And so I caught the bug and I was going around. But a lot of the places that I go to, did I tell you about the estate sale that I waited in line for? Stacy and I, we actually got there early, and there was a huge line, kind of like that one we went to on Beacon, but it was bigger than that. And by the time I got in, I was like, where are the records? And they're like, oh, it's downstairs. Totally packed house. Get downstairs, and just as I'm about to look at the records, this guy is like, oh, no, I'm buying all this. I'm like, well, which ones are you buying? He's like, no, I'm buying all of it. And so I'm like,
don't kill my vibe, dude.
And I'm like, oh, I waited, and I got down here. I waited in line, He just swooped in and bought, and it was probably, I don't know, hundreds of records. And so they're taping it up so that he can kind of carry it. And he's just like, how am I going to carry this? And I'm just like, I don't think you're going to carry it. It's too heavy. It was just all one big box. And so anyway, the person selling was like, do you want to look at them first before you buy the whole lot? He's like, no, that's okay. And I'm like, so wait, he didn't even look at the records. He just bought them without even looking at what the records he was buying, because a lot of these estate sales have some really crap records in there, you know what I mean? Which are sometimes fun, but oftentimes not. And then he also said, the next thing he said was, I wouldn't know how to evaluate the value.
What?
Anyway, yeah. So,
who is this? What is he going to do with them?
Well, so what's your theory as to why?
I mean, so some people sell in such bulk online that it's worth it to them. I mean, it makes me worried that he's doing like some art project with records and doesn't really care.
Did we already talk about this?
No.
Oh, because that's what I came up with. I was like, maybe it's an art project. That's so funny. I swear to God, I've already talked about this. We haven't had this conversation yet?
No, but I'm going to retell the conversation that we just had, which is my father has had this block of records that he hasn't listened to, I believe, since 1980. And he's turning 82 this year. And
packed with a bunch of good stuff,
I'm
right?
sure there's Kiki D records in there. There's old Bob Dylan. So I said to Dad, I want all your records. My dad is like the most generous, distracted person. You actually kind of remind me. Like he would just give you the shirt off his back. So then he writes me and says, now the neighbors want the records, but I'll give them to you first. So immediately I write back as the classic jilted child and say, I was first, give me all the records.
Yeah.
And then I sat on it for 24 hours and I felt bad. And then I said, why don't we FaceTime? I'll tell you the records that I want, because he has to ship them up here and it's going to be expensive. But I'm sure he has like the original Sticky Fingers album with the zip cover. And, you know, he's probably got albums in there that he doesn't know are worth like $200 a piece.
Yeah. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, was in L.A. at
San Francisco in the 70s.
Oh, San Francisco in the 70s. For some reason, I thought he was in...
He was an actor. He had many friends in L.A.
Oh.
But there are just these...
But he was like hippie San Francisco, that whole thing.
Yeah.
So you know his record.
The music is really good, people.
Yeah, right.
Someone just asked me, like, what are you listening to? And I said, I've rediscovered this Phoebe Snow album that I didn't know about, because I found it at the Awesome Estate sale where I found the Paul McCartney For You, and I've been listening to it nonstop. And like any Bonnie Raitt album is amazing.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of Bonnie Raitt.
I love...
You realize what people actually bought back in the day.
Yeah.
You'll see the same records. Like there's this one Christmas compilation record with Babs and also White Christmas and stuff. And I see it everywhere. There's a few other things where I'm like, I didn't realize this was so popular, you know?
Well, and there was just a lot less to choose from, too. And then musicals, like we found this... Was I with you when we found Sweet Charity, the original cast album with... Is it Gwen Verne? She's amazing. She was the muse of Bob Fosse. I mean, and then once you put it on, your whole body is like transported back 4 decades and you're a child again in your living room wearing scarves dancing around. Like there's just something about records. It's the pops and the effort that it takes to listen to the music, take it out of the sleeve, put it on the thing, put the needle on. It's so different than just like pressing a button.
Yeah. So the
record I got you was
Paul McCartney, Tug of War. We had that record growing up in our collection. My parents somehow bought it, and it's like 84, 83-ish. The biggest song on that album is Say, Say, Say with Michael. So they did 2 songs together. The Girl Is Mine is Say, Say, Say.
And then they did Ebony and Ivory.
No, that's Stevie Wonder.
Oh.
And so, yeah, Stevie Wonder, 100%.
Okay, sorry.
And so with Stevie Wonder and with Michael Jackson, they wrote and recorded 2 great songs each. And on one album was for one guy. So Stevie Wonder and Paul recorded 2. One song was on Paul album and one song was on a Stevie Wonder album. Same. So for Michael, he got The Girl Is Mine, which I believe is on Thriller.
That's one of the best.
Yeah, it's a great song. And Say, Say, Say is on Paul McCartney's album, which isn't my favorite song. But the rest of the album, Pipes of Peace, or Tug of War, is... it's not Tug of War. It's Pipes of Peace. It's the other album, Tug of War. Anyway, Pipes of Peace album. Great album. Love it. Thank you so much. We played a little bit of it. Ringo Starr is on it. I really love that album. So for me, I was like getting back into records, but I was worried that I was just there was a time when I got obsessed with the Atari 2600 because this would have been like 20 years ago. And because on eBay, you could buy the original Atari and you could buy because as a kid, all I wanted was
Pong.
Well, no.
Asteroids?
I had Asteroids, but I wanted all the games.
Oh.
You know, like...
I didn't know anyone that had more than Pong and Asteroids. There were other games?
Oh, my God. You didn't know about all the Atari? We're the same age.
I know. I just didn't hang out with people that did any of this stuff.
Oh my goodness. There's hundreds of Atari games. This is new information to you?
Yes.
Defender, Missile Command, Combat, Yar's Revenge.
I mean,
the infamous E.T. game that was a big bust. Anyway.
How do you turn E.T. into a game?
It was terrible. It actually killed Atari. Atari was already kind of dying, but then E.T. came out, and we actually had it, and it was terrible. Anyway, point is that I bought an Atari 2600. I bought the controllers. I bought a bunch of cartridges, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to play Atari. I'm finally going to be able to play all the games I wanted. And I even had I got a pad and paper to keep track of my top scores, And I played through the games one evening, with a couple friends and a couple beers. And I'm like, okay, that was fun. Played it another time and was like, this isn't actually very fun. And never played it again.
Wow.
So I had probably months of researching and buying and getting, because you also have to get those adapters.
Yeah, I was like, what did you plug it into?
Yeah, you have to get like a TV that has those, a tube TV that has those. Anyway. And I was worried that the record obsession I was having over the past year would be the same. But now that I'm actually living the life as a record hipster, I'm actually terribly enjoying it. It doesn't make any logical sense, of course, because you
can buy these songs.
Well, I have a pro account on Spotify, so I can listen to literally every song at all times. I can even listen to an album if I could just say, play this album, and don't let me play anything else, But it's a completely different emotional experience.
Totally different.
It just doesn't, and so.
And what I found is there's songs that you forgot about. Like I found Diana Ross. I can't remember what album it is, but it's the one that folds out. But it was like, oh my God, there was a time before this song existed. Like there's more of an impact when you listen to an album because of the process that it takes to actually put it on, that the music's, I don't know, it has more resonance for me. And then also you've got the liner notes and the full, the fold out album, and there's like, it's such a bigger experience.
Totally. So I'm really digging it, and thanks for getting me the Paul album.
Anytime.
And with your dad's collection,
I can't wait.
Throw me a bone. That's all I'll say.
Well, if the Sticky Fingers album is there with the zipper, you can have it.
All right. Let's take a break. Get back. Let's actually get to this Reddit post. Okay, Reddit post. So you might appreciate this, Rebecca. When I saw this, this is the whole reason why I wanted to do this with you. It says, what exactly do you find stressful about this work? So this is on our therapist is the subreddit therapist. What exactly do you find stressful about this work? It's no surprise that many of us are stressed and teetering on the edge of burnout these days. So I'm interested in what exactly everyone finds stressful about their job. For me, it's mainly from being an introvert and feeling the need to always have the right thing to say, and pressure from parents who expect instant progress and solutions with their kids. So any thoughts? So there's a lot of different people chiming in, but what do you think about that one? And or what makes you most stressed out?
Well, I'd love to talk about what is currently making me stressed out. So back it up. So for the last 10 years, I have not done student informational interviews. I just needed a break that ended up being a 10-year break. But I'm back in the saddle.
Student informational interviews?
Yeah, like when a student writes you and says, I need to interview a working therapist.
Oh, right.
Ethics, blah, blah, blah. And I'm always just like, ugh. About 10 years ago, I was like, I could never do another one of these.
Yeah, I kind of drew that boundary a while ago, too.
And all of a sudden, I felt like, I can't really volunteer the way my schedule is. It's so crazy. But here's a way I can easily volunteer. So I've been saying yes recently. So
a lot of people are going to contact you now.
I know. I'm also okay. All right. I have time for one a week, people. So this woman, the way the question was phrased was really interesting, and it was about inpatient services. And I said to her, it's impossible to get anybody in emergency psych bed in Washington State, right? And she goes, no, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, No, honey, there aren't any services. So if your class is being taught that like these services like exist, and like if your client's decompensating, you can like they can easily be sent away. That's not the truth in Washington State. And so I would say what I'm most stressed out about right now is not actually the individual needs of my clients, but the lack of support in the system for low functioning people that really need it, and how much that stresses everyone else out.
Mm-hmm.
So
and that stresses you out.
It stresses me out because clients come in with problems that it would have been like, oh, in the old days, send X person away and get them the really in-depth treatment that they need. There's nowhere to, no one has the money. There's no beds. I mean, there's stories. I think it was in Island County that a kid was in the hallway of a ER for like 24 days or something. They had no bed for this kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was on John Oliver, I believe.
Oh, it was? Yeah. Oh, right. He did a whole thing about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what's currently stressing me out, which I guess is a relief. That's not the individual. I've gone am I micro? No, I'm macro. The macro is stressing me out. But this work is hard. You'll never please everyone. Someone will always be mad at you. There's always more to give. You can never give enough. And then there's just, especially now since the pandemic, there's just endless clients. So I'm having this super messed up problem with my email, which is that an email that I stopped using 10 years ago but still would forward to me, the server died somewhere in cyberspace and it's now just dead. And so people are like, I can't get a hold of you. I can't find you. And I'm like, actually, this is kind of good. Like, you really have to search me out. And many people do. They take the time to find me through my website. But it's just kind of interesting that I was kind of enjoying. But one of the things that happened was one of the insurances is still using that email, even though I've updated it like 20 times with them. And in the middle of the pandemic, I was getting probably 15 emails a day asking for providers for mental health services.
What do you mean?
Like
clients who are looking for a therapist?
This is like a automated email from the insurance company saying this client with these issues is looking for services. Please email back if you can. I would get like 15 of those a day. And now since they're using this outdated email that I've updated with them 4 times, I don't get those emails anymore.
What insurance was this?
Regents or Primera.
Yeah. Okay, so let's read the next person. The next person lists a bunch of things. Or no, sorry. Let's just read each one and let me know what you think about this. It's hard for me to hold, so this person's saying, this is what I'm stressed about. It's hard for me to hold space for everyone's trauma while working on my own. Mm-hmm. Feels like my whole life is trauma some days. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's real intense. We are in the high holidays of Judaism right now. And for Rosh Hashanah, I was in person for services for the first time in 3 years. So it was already very, very emotional. Part of all of the services of Rosh Hashanah are standing for the mourner's Kaddish, which never mentions death, which is interesting. It's just support. And he said, if there's any names that you wanted to add and talk about confidentiality, all the names that came up were friends and loved ones of my clients who've died in the last year, because we've all lost so much. And I was just like, this is insane. Like, I forgot my losses because I processed those losses more than I processed my own.
I see. So when you're in your personal, ceremony and being asked to personally talk about names of individuals who have died recently, the names that come to your mind first are your clients' loved ones who you never met, right?
Right.
Instead of your own loved ones, because you care a lot and there's a lot of pain going on with your clients.
Yeah. So that was a sign to me of like, oh, wow.
What is it a sign of exactly?
That I still have a lot of death to process on my own. And, I probably don't take the time in my own therapy to process all the things there are to grieve in my own life right now. We had 3 of our close women friends, 3 mothers died in a month.
Wow.
All of cancer. all very quickly. And there, I mean, it was, have you sent out the condolence letter? No, I forgot that one, but I remembered this one. Like, it was just so overwhelming.
Yeah. What do you think about trauma, though, in general? They're saying it's hard for me to hold space for everyone's trauma while working on my own. Yeah, it's a broader topic than loss.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I feel lucky to have the sensory motor context, which is that you do not focus very much on the trauma narrative, and you focus a lot about what the body is experiencing in trauma.
What do you mean? Tell us.
So in classic, I don't know how you were trained, but the classic trauma recovery that I was trained in was that you had to tell the story of the bad thing that happened to you. And then after you told the story, you would feel better. And that's true for some people, but some people have so many traumas that they don't need to tell the story. And so what sensory motor would say, I don't know, say something to me like there was a fire, or there was a fire. There was a fire. So when you say that there was a fire, where do you hold it in your body? Mm-hmm. And then we do that work. Well, I really hold it in my chest. Okay, let's take some deep breaths there. And then something bigger might come up, and I'll say, is that a thought? Is that a body sensation? Is that a memory? So I'm not pulling for more content of the story. Mm-hmm. I'm pulling for more mindfulness about your reaction to telling the story. Mm.
And having awareness and care for your body, time to feel it and notice it and talk about it.
Yeah, it's very slow work. And then when we end the session, I'll say, how do you feel in your body right now? Trying to ground people. And this is the work of Dr. Janina Fisher. If you're looking to study with the best trauma trainer, I believe, on the planet, she has something going through Pressy right now. I think it's like a 9-month masterclass. It's incredibly expensive, but she's getting up there in age, and she's probably the most experienced trauma trainer. She ran the back of the house for Bessel van der Kolk. When he ran the front, she was actually training all the clinicians. So, there's some great models in trauma treatment where you will feel less traumatized. Mm-hmm.
Do you ever feel like it's hard to hold space for people's traumas? Like this person says?
I limit how many I do in a day. I try not to do more than 5 sessions on an average day.
Still a lot.
It is a lot. During the height of the pandemic, I was only working 3 weeks a month. I told my clients, it's just too much. I want to continue to be there for you. But in order to do that, I can only work 3 weeks a month. And everybody was really understanding, because at that point, people were leaving the profession in droves. So they were like, I'm thankful I have a therapist 3 times a month. This is not easy work. This is not for everyone. You have to have a full life. You have to have a hobby that brings you delight. For me, it's making art and looking for records at estate sales. Like, yeah. I have the world's cutest dog. I have a child that will watch any show on Disney. We tried to watch She-Hulk Attorney at Law. It was horrible, but we laughed all the way through it. So I
kind of like the beginning. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I thought the first couple episodes were okay.
I can't believe that actress who did Orphan Black and was one of the most incredible actresses of her time. Her next role is She-Hulk Attorney at Law.
Yeah.
The universe has gotten very strange.
I forgot that a lot of therapists were quitting the profession during the pandemic.
2 of my most favorite people stopped working.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like we need to document what happened. The pandemic was so weird, and there were some things that were happening that were so specific. In fact,
how about this? If you were a therapist who left the field in the pandemic, please write us.
Yeah.
We'd love to record your story, and we're really thinking about what the field has lost in this time.
Right. What do you remember as to why people did it?
Some of my friends who were older were like, this is too dangerous and I don't like the technology. They didn't know if they'd ever work in person again. Other of my friends got so burnt out that they just went and did something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that not only therapists, but I think that was true in a lot
teachers,
of careers.
nurses.
Yeah, because it's sort of like when you go through a divorce or a death or something and you reevaluate, like, wait, what am I doing with my life again? And you are suddenly faced with this underground growing dissatisfaction maybe anyway, because it never crossed my mind to not be a therapist during the pandemic. You know, it never crossed my mind to change my career because I think I liked my career. You know what I mean? Well, I guess I take that. Well,
but you switched up too. I mean, you went to more podcasting and basically stopped teaching.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, I still teach every now and then, but yeah, I mean, I was full-time at the university, so I guess I'm completely lying right now.
And I'm here to keep you honest.
Yeah. But I had been seriously thinking about going full podcast for a long time, and and was actually planning on quitting full-time at Antioch a couple years prior, but I would get like a good batch of students and I'd be like, oh, maybe I'm just being too uptight about things, and I can endure for the students, and then there'd be another string of bad situations, and I'd be like, okay, definitely leave. And then I resolved to myself, I said, okay, give it another year or two. If you feel more often annoyed than not annoyed after that time, then maybe it's time to go, because I couldn't tell if I was just overblowing the occasional annoyance, you know what I mean? Because I became such a prima donna at the university because I was the only one there that had been there that long. Or
I remember when we were.
Yeah, I mean, aside from Ann Blake and Ned Farley and Janice Oshino and maybe a couple others, I was the only one that had been there a long time, and I had this other gig, the podcast, that I could, I felt less stress about, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, when the pandemic hit, and especially since the podcast did a lot better, I'm like, oh yeah, foregone conclusion. This is over. I'm, maybe I'll go back one day, and I still teach. I want to teach, but yeah. So, all right, next.
Well, and I'll just piggyback on that. I mean, the tarot workshop came through for me big time, and I went from teaching 2 workshops a year to teaching 6. And that's huge. And it was, the pandemic. I came up with this wacky idea. I'll teach therapists how to make tarot cards. What? And people were like, yes, that's what I want to do. So, yeah, I think it changed a lot of people's lives.
Yeah. More time on our hands to think. You're
stuck by yourself.
Well, I think also the pandemic highlighted stresses. I'll never forget when I was in graduate school, because of course I was raised in a misogynistic culture that framed, menstruation as that time when women were crazy kind of a thing. And I remember a professor in graduate school saying, well, yeah, I mean, another way of looking at it is that women put up with so much shit all the time that when they're menstruating and they're quote unquote hormonal, it's the time when they can't take the shit anymore and they start to speak up. And I remember thinking, wow, that's absolutely another way of looking at it. And with the pandemic, I think it highlighted the shit in our lives, right? Because if you loved being a therapist, then you would tolerate the online nature of it. But if you were burning out severely on being a therapist, then the online nature or the increase in stress in all of our lives would highlight like, yeah, I don't think I'm into it. And I think for me with teaching, it was that way. I love the students and I love the teaching part. It was just all the other stuff, that just the meetings and the paperwork and they were always adding new paperwork things. And I was just like, I just can't, I can't do it anymore, And the pandemic really highlighted that. So I think maybe that was a factor.
And plus, when you think you might die and people around you are dying,
right, it
really makes clear what is important and what's no longer worth your time.
Right. Is it worth it, really?
Yeah. And while you were talking, I was thinking it was the opposite, that I knew if I could go back to working in person, I could continue to be a therapist. But if it was going to continue to be this online thing, there's just the feedback loop is so broken. And for me, the art is the best part. Like this, I was at an estate sale and they had moon sand. Do you know what moon sand is? It's pumice mixed with wax. And it's like sand, but it kind of has it's a lot less messy. And I just bought a pack of it and I bought it into the office and clients have been using it all week and like playing with their hands. And
it's the kind that sticks together.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, this is why the work is great. Because like there's a client playing with moon sand the entire 3D, talking, destroying, building back up, putting it back together, clearing space, filling it in. You know, rewiring their brains through play. Like this is the fun part for me. If I'm going to have to look at a Zoom screen all day, my eyes are going to fall out.
Yeah. Well, side note, that's why early in the pandemic, I actually, now that I think about it, I never used Zoom with my clients. I only used the phone. Primarily because I hate Zoom for therapy because of that reason, because of the lag and just having to stare at a two-dimensional screen and there's no eye contact. But also because all the clients I I've been treating for at least 5+ years and thus had enough knowledge of their voice to be able to detect body, because we lack body language when we're over the phone. And so, but I knew the clients so well that I found over time that it didn't really diminish the therapy at all. So that's what I did. But yeah, if I had to do Zoom, and that was a big kicker also for teaching. I mean, teaching over Zoom was just I realize for some professors it's not that big of a deal, but I think for professors like you and me,
who create environments,
you and I didn't say you and I, professors like you and me, I think that it's almost impossible for us to even get 80% of the fulfillment, both for professor and student, if we're over Zoom. It's just such a. And I remember when we first started doing it, I'm just like, well, this should be fine, right? I mean,
for a month or two.
Well, not only that, but it
full on snorted.
Yeah, but I thought it would not be that bothersome. But what I quickly realized was that a big part of teaching for me is that the ability for people to chime in, essentially. And when you're on Zoom, everyone mutes their microphones because they're trying to be polite, and thus the lectures just turn into me yammering the whole time without any chiming in or someone just kind of going, like those little things are what make this job fulfilling to me, is those interactive 3D eye contact, body language moments, like a big part of my model of teaching is I always would organize the tables and the chairs in the shape of a U, if it was a didactic class, because then I would sort of roam in the middle of the circle, and I could actually, if someone asked a question, I could actually go right up to them on the other side of the U, on the inside of the U, and I could sort of pace around. Whereas on Zoom, I have to just sit there, and it just doesn't feel good. Anyway, another person said that they became burnt out lately. They say, emotional labor in the sense of having to perform emotions that aren't congruent with what I'm feeling. Hiding annoyance and anger, feigning empathy when I'm not feeling it. Any thoughts on that?
That's burnout right there.
It also sounds like the person... I mean, it's like, what's going on? I mean, if it's just burnout, okay. But on the other hand, it's like, do you understand how alarming that is to you as a clinician? Like if you're feigning empathy or hiding a fair amount of annoyance and anger, like, what are you doing? There's so many other ways to deal with that, right? You could say, I'm annoyed with you right now.
Right.
Or I'm having a hard time finding empathy right now, or I don't know. Or just don't feign the empathy. Just listen with sympathy, I suppose.
Yeah, or just be there with them.
Yeah, right. But then the next person, they say, so they have a whole list here on this person. Devoting my life to others. What do you think about that one?
Hey, are they Catholic? God. So I don't know if I devote. I mean, I do live a life of service. Like, I have friends that make a whole lot more money than me. But, I turn the clock off and I get my time to myself in the evenings.
So I'd say you're devoted to your clients and to your profession, but you're not.
I keep showing up.
But you're not devoting your entire life to your clients. Yeah. No wonder they're hiding annoyance, anger, and not feeling empathy because there's no room for them. Another bullet point here for the internal pressure to fix them and change everything.
Oh, yeah.
Change everything quickly. Yeah, this is sounding like someone who needs a good dose of supervision and help with this.
So let's just unpack that one for a minute.
Yeah.
I love the quote for therapists. You should be working half as hard as your client. Like if they're not working, they're not going to change. And there's tons of reasons that people can't change. They don't have a support system. They're working 2 jobs. They, have this burden or that burden. Maybe you're not with them in a time of change. Maybe you're holding space for them and eventually they'll stop seeing you and then they'll change. So this idea that you're a therapist to see all your clients change and get better is loaded.
Yeah. When you take all these bullet points together.
I didn't realize this was all the same person.
Yeah. Then you're thinking, oh, this person is in desperate need of some help. Their next bullet point. There's so much to learn, which is also fun, but sometimes it can feel hard to be an expert when new things can pop up. Even when we specialize, we kind of are experts on human existence. Anything can be therapy material. I don't even know what that sounds confusing.
Things really do change. Somebody was just asking me, what are all the ADHD meds for adults? And I was like, I can't keep track of that. Like you could just
plus
Google
it's not really your expertise.
Right, you can just Google that one. But things are changing all the time. If you like things to stay the same, being a therapist is not for you. Like, things are constantly changing and the pandemic has changed a lot of things. I remember I was taking this class and the teacher was talking about when to refer out. And I had a moment like I just had earlier in our conversation when I was like, there's no one to refer to. Like there's no referring out at this point. So yeah, there is a way.
Did you say that?
I said it to him because he was teaching a class as if that was an option, and I got kind of pissed.
Yeah. And what do you say?
He was like, well, blah, blah, blah. But I was like,
well, what do you mean? I got to hear this. So wait, what kind of class was this?
It was a psychodynamic continuing education class.
Online,
on Zoom. And it
was like Q&A period, probably.
Yes.
Sounds like Q&A period.
And he made a statement about, and when we refer out. And
Did he seem to be jumping to referring out a little quick?
No.
Oh.
But I just needed to say, hey, I don't know if other therapists are feeling this way, but right now with some of the clients I'm seeing, it's either they see me or they wait 4 months.
And not 4 months, but for several months.
Yes.
To find someone that has an open spot. And even then, that therapist might not be a good fit and da-da-da.
Right.
Yeah. And so what did he say?
I can't remember. They kind of stumbled. We've worked with this kind of person that is not participating in what the current system is like and is not aware of what the current system is like. I don't think he was ready for my question. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. If he was working in the current system, he would be like, yeah, totally get that. And yet some situations, maybe we should try or something like that. But I'm guessing his answer was like thinking from a place of like, what are you talking about? Right. Like it's like thinking from a place from 30 years ago or something when he used to work more collaboratively.
Or even 5 years ago.
Yeah. Another thing here. Right now in private practice, building a caseload is stressful. Okay. Although I'm finding with novice therapists that I know and have worked with, they're not having any problem building a caseload these days.
Yeah.
Because
the need is so great.
Because the demand is so great, but also because of things opening up to online therapy, people are much more likely.
But you can fit it in the middle of a day.
Yeah. And it's less of an annoyance for clients because they don't have to drive and da-da-da. another thing here is this is more bullet points from the same person. Certain settings pushing CBT or behavioral models when they don't suit you is stressful. Feeling like you have to prove your work in your documentation. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so cognitive behavioral has become the law of the land, and it doesn't work for every client. And then you have to go to your paperwork after the session and fit it into cognitive behavioral language. And it's hard. It's no fun. It takes the fun out of the work.
There are ways to do it. And
I was damn good, and I taught people how to do it.
Okay, good, yeah. There are ways.
I was like, you have your 6. This is how I would teach it. This is back in the day. I don't know, we were still handwriting notes. I was like, use these 6 words. Have these 6 words sitting on a Post-it note on your computer, and just use 2 of them in every note, and you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And the model that I would teach, similar, I think, to yours, is you don't want to reinvent the wheel every time you're writing a note, because I would also say, I'm interrupting you like crazy. No, please.
I would always say, remember who your audience is. Your audience is not a great clinician. Your audience is an auditor that barely understands what we do.
Yeah, and they're just skimming anyway.
Yeah.
And long, specific, individualized notes are annoying to them on some level.
Yeah. 1, 2 sentences.
But yeah, very, very quick and to the point. And feel free to recycle sentences, because what's the chance that every session with every client is like completely unique, you know?
Right. And also, and as graduate students, I understand, like, we would write 40-page papers and think we were supposed to be great thinkers. And we get out in the field, and unless you're continuing to do academic writing, which like 0.1% of us do, your writing life goes to writing these stupid 2 sentences over and over and over again.
Right.
It is demoralizing.
If you think of it as a representation of the glorious work that you're doing in therapy, whereas if you just think of it as, this is the busy work that I have to do that has a usefulness to it, but it's extremely limited in its usefulness. It's not a representation of what I did. It's not a representation of the depth that we went into. It's not a representation of the vast emotional twists and turns that the client went on, and me too, frankly, as a therapist, but it is what I need to document for a lot of different reasons. The other element that I would add is, you're not fraudulently writing a note. You're actually accurately describing what you did within the CBT language, but it's just not necessarily how you're always thinking. You don't have to make up or lie and say, we worked on these 3 cognitive techniques. It's like a lot of therapy is, you wouldn't think of it as CBT, but it actually is CBT if you think of it that way, looking at it from the outside. So you just have to document it in that way.
Right. And it's, you're addressing self-esteem, you're addressing black and white thinking. There's all of these pretty basic things that we do at least once in every session.
Exactly. All right, the last
Exactly.
The last bullet point from this individual: the life-death nature of the field, depending on your clientele. Working with suicidal clients can be stressful. It's not so much for me because of experience, but it still takes a toll to have that weight. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is difficult work. I try and frame it in the sense that we are doing everything we can to support that client, and we're using all the skills that we have. And I think most people's biggest fear in this work is that a client will suicide. And for the clinicians that I know that it's happened to, it is absolutely devastating. It's also, for the average clinician, not that common. It doesn't happen, at least in my work, every day or even every year.
Have you lost clients to suicide?
This is going to sound crazy. I've never lost a client to suicide.
Yeah, neither have I.
I've lost clients. Clients have died for other reasons.
I'm trying to think of any of my... It's been so many years. It must have happened out of my awareness, obviously, a past client. Oh, no. Yeah. I had a client that died from a young woman who died from an overdose. So that I did have a client that I was supposed to intake that day, and he killed himself that morning, but I hadn't met him yet. So that felt like something, right? Because I had gotten to know the intake over the phone a little bit, and so it felt. But I was like, well, I can't be responsible, right? Because there was no indication of that on the intake. So, but yeah, I'm not surprised. I think it's, well, I guess it is surprising given the clientele that you attract and typically work with.
But I also, in practice, I will let people know if you're suicidal. I'm not a great clinician for you.
Oh, really?
Especially now, because I'm out of the office more and more doing these trainings.
Do you do that at screening? So if someone in the beginning says they suffer from suicidal thoughts, you'll actually recommend they seek someone else?
Yeah, I'll just say I'm just not that available.
Time and energy and that required to help someone be safe.
Yeah. And when I teach a 6-hour training, I purposely don't go on my phone because I don't need any content to knock me off my game. I'm a method actor when it comes to my 6-hour presentations. Yeah. I need to be there doing that.
Yeah. I don't know. For whatever reason, for me, I think there's a pro and a con to this. I've never really been affected in this way. Like if I had 10 clients that had died by suicide while I was treating them over the past 25 years, I mean, I don't know how obviously it would impact me, but I don't know if it would really burn me out. I mean, maybe I'm wishful thinking, but...
Well, I think you and I are similar in the sense that we understand what we offer people.
Yeah.
We offer people a window of time to potentially touch in with their greater sense of self.
Right.
I'm not fixing anyone. I'm not solving anything. I'm potentially making things worse by pointing certain things out.
You're going to need a therapist to deal with me.
But, I'm also incredibly present. I mean, when I think of the amount of time that me and my clients laugh together. So with this laundry list that this person has, I can tell, like, where's the fun part? I mean, the fun part for me is when clients and I laugh together, when I notice who made their clothes because of the color and I guess right, and they're so touched that I knew that. Or
human experiences. Yeah. You're alive in the room. You're not just there terrified of trying to fix someone.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what sensory motor really taught me how to do, is like, just be with someone, just be.
Yeah.
And if they're ready to change, they'll change. And that attunement dance is most of the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's just a few more. We're running out of time, but I just want to rattle through them because I'm a completist. So no more from this person, but going on to some other people. Next person. And Brett, they get stressed out, burnt out lately because as a therapist, they are having trouble embracing the ambiguity. Am I being effective with this client?
Yes.
Was this client sending me a message by canceling at the last minute, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Thoughts on that?
Yeah. This was a Twitter feed recently. What has COVID taught you? And I wrote, never make plans, never expect plans to work out. And that there is so much ambiguity right now. So I've had clients no show, and it's funny what goes through my mind now. Like, oh, maybe they're hospitalized with COVID. Like, these horrible things that would have never crossed my mind. Before, if someone would have no showed, I would have been like, oh, God, it's all about me. No. Because COVID has been so life or death, it's really made me, things don't feel like they're that much my fault or that much related to me, because so many bigger, maybe they've got a relative in Florida and they can't get a hold of them and they're trying to figure that out. It just feels like there's so much to worry about right now that's beyond me, that I'm just, most of my clients show up most of the time and I'm kind of amazed.
Have you got the booster?
I have had COVID.
Oh, right.
I need to get it at the end of October, and I need to plan to be out for 2 days. So
you had Omicron, right?
What did I call it? Omicron?
Omicron. You called it Omicron.
Omicron.
Yeah.
And
I'm scheduled to have the booster pretty soon.
But. And did we talk during my Omicron? That virus is super vicious.
Tell us.
I wasn't hospitalized, but things that were happening to me, I got pretty delirious and I started laughing so hard, and then I started coughing so hard that the dogs were staring at me like, is this it, mommy? Is this how you go out? I could only eat popsicles and pudding. Because
of the pain?
I just couldn't tolerate that much. And I built up to bone broth. My neck.
So pain in your throat?
Yeah. I immediately lost my sense of smell, and I've not gotten it back.
You haven't gotten it back?
I mean, I can smell really intense things. There was something that was very chemically on these new mics that I could smell. I can smell mildew. I can smell fire. So like when the fires happened, I could smell that. I can smell rotten cantaloupe at the grocery store.
So all bad things.
I could smell basil.
Okay.
But it's not great.
Have some people never got there?
Some people have never got their smell back. It does make you crazy. I will say that. You look at something and you're like, like this. I know this smells. It does make me worry that like my house will smell like dog pee and no one will tell me.
Yeah.
So please, if you come over and it smells like dog pee, please alert me.
Okay. So just to get people a timeline,
yes.
How many weeks ago did you first have symptoms?
So this was towards the end of July.
And we're at the end of September, early October.
I was totally out for a week.
So end of July, so all of August, all of September. So over 2 months ago was when you had the first bit of it.
Yeah, and then the post-COVID fatigue was so intense. So as a parent, I think those of you who are parents will relate to this. You know, when you're a parent, like everything your kid does wakes you up. Like they come in, they come out, you know, even when you're sick, you wake up. And there was this morning where I was testing negative, but I was still so exhausted. And I woke up at 10 or 12 o'clock and the house was empty. So everyone had left the house and I was so deeply exhausted that I didn't even hear all of those sounds that have kept me alert, all of these, you know, just gone. And then later in that week, I slept twice. I slept through 2 very important meetings, not client meetings, which I think is interesting that my body was preserving me to work with clients. But they were just like other important things that I needed to do. Just completely slept through them. So that was a trip. And I started I found a treatment that works for me now through a naturopath. But it was pretty scary. And I realized...
So what was scary? Like at the peak, what was the coughing fit? Was that the...
That was really, really scary.
Because you couldn't breathe?
Yeah, I mean, you feel like you're not in control of your body. And you just feel very small. And the fatigue is so intense. But I realized I'm so terrified of the brain fog. Like, if I didn't have my cognitive wit... that would be devastating for me. I'll take the fatigue over not being able to put a sentence together or track what I'm thinking. And that was actually a Rosh Hashanah. There is a prayer of like, here I am, God, kind of take me as I am. And I was sitting there crying because I was so tired, but I was like, you know, thank you for letting me keep my brain. Because if I didn't have my brain right now, I mean, I understand why people they lose it with this if they've got long COVID, because you just feel like a prisoner. And even my Western doc was like, yeah, give yourself 3 months of the fatigue. I was like, 3 months? And I just had to finally believe her. And like last night, I slept for 12 hours. And the other thing was, if I push myself too far, I get the shakes, and they're like these ratchety shakes, and I just have to lie down. And there's nothing I can do. It's like my body's completely spent. So I'm taking potassium, but it
was scary. For how long of a period of time were you sitting there thinking you might die?
I never thought I would die, but I was like, this is I've heard lots of people say this. Like, I've had the flu. This is the sickest I've ever been. And there's a difference to it your different systems are getting hit. My lungs were getting hit in this way. The fatigue was like nothing I'd ever experienced. And I've had adult Epstein-Barr. Like, I'm used to feeling tired, but this was like, I cannot move. And when I got the shakes, it was like, I can't get out of bed. Like, I'm afraid to walk. And I've never had a virus have those kinds of symptoms with it.
But your brain was still working.
I think so. It's still working now. And for that, knock on wood,
What was it like to see your clients during that time?
When I had the shakes, well, I did cry. My first client that I had to explain, like, I have long COVID. You will know, like, I apologize in advance if I yawn. And then I just started crying. And I was like, oh, fuck. Luckily, she was a therapist herself and was very understanding. But I got better at the speech after that. But I had a weighted blanket on me, and I just didn't move a whole bunch. And it actually felt good to work in that sense of like, oh, I'm human.
Yeah.
But that's all I could do. I would work and then I would go home and sleep.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. And so it services Rosh Hashanah up, down, up, down, up, down. I don't know if other religions are like this, stand, sit, stand, sit. And about 20 minutes into a 2-hour service, I realized I can't do this. And I just sat. I was like, it's more important to me to make it through this whole service. I'm sure God will forgive me if I don't up, down, up, down, up, down.
Wow, that's intense. I mean, you were telling me this in pieces, but I didn't know how intense it was. It sounds awful.
It's awful. This is and
because I feel like a lot of people are just like, oh yeah, like Stacy had it. A lot of people got it in my circle a few months ago, and they barely noticed it. Like if they weren't hypervigilant about COVID, they would have thought they weren't even sick. They just thought, well, maybe I just am a little tired or something. Like a slight scratchiness in her throat and a little bit of confusion one day. So I think, but I do hear stories like yours, and
mine's mild.
Yeah.
So there are people who can't work anymore.
Yeah, we're and long COVID, as you're saying, and I feel like we need to remind ourselves of the reality of this virus.
Yeah, just be gentle with yourself, and if you've got it, just really rest. It's okay to rest. It's really the most important thing that you can do, and it's going to impact our culture. And get vaccinated, and it's going to impact our culture in terms of there's going to be I think there's like 1 million plus people that are going to have long COVID. Mm-hmm. It's a new disease. It's a new long-term debilitating disease.
Yeah, I mean, we're already getting access to data about all sorts of psychological, physiological, economical, political impacts of this event for people. And so, yeah. And it's not over really. And there could be another virus that could come out.
Yeah.
So, and from the experts, like if we had a horrible pandemic, SARS-CoV-2 is like a good practice run because it's not as bad as other like Ebola or other kinds of viruses that are much more deadly and da-da-da. So on that depressing note,
science.
But I'm glad you're better.
I'm glad I'm back. It took me 2 months to get here.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you like the chair.
The chair really helped.
I'm glad that
I drink a lot of water.
I'm glad that people sent you gifts during the 14th and you got a chance to acquire those. I'm glad you brought me a Paul McCartney album that didn't have any skips, by the way. And it looks like an original copy that was in a house with a lot of smoking. You could kind of see the smoke stain on the outside. I don't know if I'm just imagining.
That house was a party house.
Oh, was it?
That house had a party room. Oh. All the records were downstairs, which is clearly this is back in the day. This is in the 60s. It had like a mini bar. Yeah. A lot of the houses that we go to, the lower floor has like a functioning kitchen.
A mini bar. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Party.
Like I think of red carpets and wood panel walls and
maybe some gold flocked mirrors.
Yeah, gold. That's what they call it, gold flocks. Yeah. All right. Well, glad you're back, and maybe we'll make a habit of this. Actually, so if anyone out there wants to send us some Reddit posts to talk about,
and I can't think of Reddit without thinking of Serena Williams because she's married to the founder of Reddit.
Really?
Is that correct?
I don't know. Don't ask me.
Anyways, thinking of Serena Williams, did you watch her last match? It was unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm not a tennis person, so I don't know anything
the fight,
about it.
The determination.
Yeah.
Keep going, everyone.
Yeah. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because
really, we love you and we love doing this. And the more you're around, the more we get to do this for you.